The iridescent spires of Eloria gleamed against the twin sunset, their crystalline surfaces refracting light into 1,000 prismatic shards across the capital city. From her vantage point in the Royal Observation Tower, Princess Variella watched as the final preparations for tomorrow's Unity Parade unfolded in the grand promenade below. Her four-fingered hand, with skin the color of pale lavender, rested against the transparent viewing panel. "Your Highness, the security briefing is complete," came a steady voice from behind her. Vriella turned to face Garrett Stone, her personal human guard. Unlike the other Elorian royal guards with their luminescent skin and elongated features, Garrett stood out with his solid frame and tanned complexion. His dark hair was cut short in the standard Galactic Alliance military style, and his gray eyes held a vigilance that never seemed to waver. "Thank you, Garrison Commander Stone," she replied formally, though a smile played at the corners of her mouth. When they were alone, the rigid protocol relaxed somewhat. "Your assessment? The parade route is secure, but I've stationed additional units at the Quadrangle Junction and the Memorial Arch." He stepped forward, joining her at the viewing panel. "The piece is still too new, Your Highness. The Void Phantoms haven't been completely eradicated." Vriella sighed, her bioluminescent freckles dimming slightly in response to her mood. 3 years since the interplanetary civil war ended, and still, we must fear shadows. Garrett didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied the final light of Eloria's dual suns as they dipped below the horizon. The first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening purple sky. "Peace takes time," he finally said, "especially between species as different as humans and Elorians." Variella glanced at him. "Yet, here we stand, proof that cooperation is possible." Their eyes met briefly before Garrett looked away, maintaining professional decorum. His assignment to the princess's security detail 4 years ago had raised eyebrows among the royal court. Humans were newcomers to the Galactic Alliance, their inclusion still controversial in many circles. But his exemplary service record had silenced most critics, and over time, a unique bond had formed between the princess and her guardian. "Will you wear the ceremonial armor tomorrow?" Variella asked, changing the subject. Garrett grimaced. "The Elorian crystal plating is beautiful but restricts movement. I've convinced the Royal Guard captain to allow a modified version." "Always practical," Variella teased. Her species valued aesthetics nearly as much as function, a cultural difference that frequently emerged in their conversations. "When your safety is concerned, always," he answered without apology. A gentle chime sounded, signaling the arrival of another visitor. The doors to the observation tower slid open, and Chief Advisor Vela entered. Her tall, willowy frame adorned with the traditional silver-blue robes of the Royal Council. "Princess, the final rehearsal for tomorrow's address awaits you in the crystalline chamber," she announced, bowing slightly. Her eyes, completely silver with no visible pupil, a mark of pure Elorian nobility, shifted briefly to Garrett before returning to Variella. "I'll be there momentarily," Variella replied. With another bow, Chief Advisor Vela departed, leaving them alone once more. "She still doesn't approve of me," Garrett observed. Vriella's bioluminescent freckles pulsed once in amusement. "Few of the Elder Council do, but my father appointed you, and not even they would question the Emperor's judgment." "And you, Princess? Do you question his judgment in assigning me?" The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken complexity. "Never," she answered softly. "Now, I mustn't keep the council waiting. They're already anxious about tomorrow's celebration." As they left the observation tower, neither noticed the small drone hovering just beyond the crystal spires. Its surveillance lens focused on their retreating figures. The morning of the Unity Parade dawned bright, with both suns rising simultaneously in a rare celestial alignment that the Elorian priests had declared auspicious. The capital streets were lined with spectators, mostly Elorians, with their characteristic luminescent skin in various hues of blue and purple. But there were notable contingents of humans and other Alliance species as well. Vriella stood on the royal viewing platform, resplendent in ceremonial attire. Her gown, woven from Elorian crystal silk, shimmered with each movement, and her head was adorned with the crown of unity, specially commissioned for this occasion. The crown featured intertwining metals from each of the major Alliance worlds, symbolizing their newfound cooperation. Garrett stood at attention 3 paces behind her. As protocol dictated, he'd compromised on the ceremonial armor, wearing the ornate Elorian breastplate, but keeping his standard-issue tactical pants and boots. His eyes constantly scanned the crowds, the rooftops, the sky. Emperor Thalos, Viriella's father, raised his hands, and the crowd fell silent. His deep voice carried effortlessly across the Grand Promenade as he spoke of healing, of unity, of a future where the scars of civil war would fade into distant memory. Midway through his speech, Garrett's communication implant vibrated against his temple. He tapped it discreetly, listening to the incoming message from the security team. "Unidentified energy signature detected in Sector 7, came the terse report. Possible cloak device? Sector 7, directly across from the royal viewing platform." Garrett's muscles tensed as he scanned the area again, this time focusing on the specific coordinates transmitted to his tactical display. There, a slight shimmer in the air near the memorial arch, like heat rising from desert sands. As he watched, the distortion grew more pronounced. Garrett moved before his conscious mind had fully processed the threat, years of training taking over. 3 long strides brought him to Variella's side, just as the shimmer coalesced into a pulsing orb of energy. "Down!" he shouted, his arm wrapping around her waist as he threw them both to the floor of the platform. The world exploded into chaos. The energy orb detonated, releasing not a conventional blast, but a wave of quantum disruptors, specialized weapons designed to target Elorian physiology by disrupting their unique bioelectric fields. Screams erupted from the crowd as royal guards rushed to surround the Emperor. In the confusion, Garrett realized with horror that a second device had materialized directly above where Variella now lay. There was no time to move her again. His decision was instantaneous. Garrett positioned himself above the princess, using his body as a shield as the second quantum disruptor detonated. The pain was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, like every cell in his body was being torn apart and reassembled incorrectly. Quantum disruptors weren't designed to affect humans, but at such close range, the energy was overwhelming. Through the haze of agony, he was dimly aware of Variella beneath him, her eyes wide with shock and fear. "Garrett!" she cried, using his first name in public for the first time. He tried to respond but couldn't form words. The edges of his vision were darkening rapidly. His last coherent thought was relief that she appeared unharmed. Then blackness claimed him. Variella's world, narrowed to the weight of Garrett's body, collapsed atop her, and the chaos erupting around them. Palace guards swarmed the platform, forming a protective circle around the royal family. "Medical team, now!" she screamed, struggling to shift Garrett's limp form enough to see his face. His skin had taken on an ashen pallor, and blood trickled from his nose and ears, signs of severe quantum exposure. The princess had basic medical training, enough to know that Garrett's condition was critical. Human physiology wasn't designed to withstand quantum disruption. The fact that he was still alive at all was remarkable. "Your Highness, we must move you to safety," insisted Captain Lorel, commander of the Palace Guard. "The attackers may strike again." "Not without him," Variella replied, her voice leaving no room for argument. Before Captain Lorel could respond, another explosion rocked the Grand Promenade. This one was conventional, designed to create panic rather than harm. Through the smoke and confusion, Variella glimpsed multiple figures in stealth suits converging on the platform. "Void Phantoms!" shouted one of the guards, opening fire with his energy rifle. The Void Phantoms, a terrorist organization that had emerged from the ashes of the Civil War, dedicated to disrupting the fragile peace between humans and Elorians. Their name came from their signature technology, quantum phase shifting, that allowed them to move between solid and incorporeal states, making them almost impossible to capture. Captain Laurel made a rapid decision. "Secure the Emperor. Lieutenant Mavis, extract the princess and her guard to Emergency Shelter Delta." Vriella found herself being pulled to her feet by Lieutenant Mavis, a young female Elorian guard. "Your Highness, please." "Help me with him," Vriella commanded, indicating Garrett. Two more guards rushed forward, lifting Garrett's unconscious form between them. Blood now soaked the front of his ceremonial armor. "This way," Lieutenant Mavis urged, leading them toward a concealed entrance at the rear of the platform. They barely made it through before another explosion collapsed the viewing platform entirely. Variella looked back in horror, searching for her father among the destruction. "The Emperor is secure," Lieutenant Mavis assured her, reading her expression. "He was evacuated through a different route." Relief flooded through Variella, but it was short-lived. As they hurried down the narrow emergency passage, the sound of pursuit echoed behind them. "They're in the evacuation tunnels," one of the guards carrying Garrett warned. Lieutenant Mavis activated her communication implant. Delta route compromised, shifting to Epsilon protocol. She placed her palm against a seemingly solid wall, which shimmered and revealed a hidden doorway. "This way, Your Highness." The new passage was darker and narrower, clearly an older evacuation route. The guards struggled to maneuver Garrett's unconscious form through the tight space. "How far to the medical center?" Variella asked, her freckles pulsing with anxiety. Lieutenant Mavis hesitated. "Your Highness, Epsilon protocol doesn't lead to the Palace Medical Center. It leads to the emergency spaceport." Vriella stopped abruptly. "Spaceport? I'm not leaving Aloria." "Direct orders from the Emperor, in case of coordinated attack," Lieutenant Mavis explained. "The royal family is to be dispersed to secure locations off-world until the threat is neutralized." Before Variella could protest further, the tunnel behind them echoed with energy weapon fire. The guards carrying Garrett faltered as one took a hit to the shoulder. "We have to keep moving," Lieutenant Mavis insisted, drawing her weapon. They resumed their desperate flight, the sounds of pursuit growing closer. After what seemed like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a small, dimly lit hangar containing a single spacecraft, a royal shuttle, designed for speed rather than comfort. "Get him aboard," Vriella ordered as they entered the hangar. The uninjured guard and Lieutenant Mavis managed to get Garrett up the boarding ramp, while Variella and the wounded guard provided cover. Just as they secured Garrett in the shuttle's small medical bay, the first of the pursuers burst into the hangar. Lieutenant Mavis immediately took position at the shuttle's weapons console. "Your Highness, we need to launch now!" Variella hesitated, torn between her duty to stay and fight for her world and her desperate concern for Garrett. The wounded guard made the decision for her, slapping the boarding ramp control and sealing the shuttle. "Go, Princess," he said grimly, drawing his sidearm with his uninjured arm. "I'll hold them off." "No," Vriella protested, but the guard was already moving back down the ramp. Lieutenant Mavis initiated the launch sequence as energy blasts began impacting the shuttle's shields. The engines roared to life, and the small craft shot upward through the opening hangar doors. Vriella watched in horror as the hangar below erupted in a fiery explosion, a final act of sacrifice from the wounded guard to delay their pursuers. "Course plotted for Sanctuary Station," Lieutenant Mavis reported as they broke atmosphere. "We'll be safe there until—" Her words were cut short as the shuttle rocked violently. Warning alarms blared throughout the cabin. "Pursuit craft!" Lieutenant Mavis shouted, hands flying over the controls. 3. No. 4 of them. Void Phantom Interceptors. Vriella strapped herself into the co-pilot seat. Can we outrun them? Not to Sanctuary Station, Lieutenant Mavis replied grimly. They've damaged our hyperdrive motivator. Another hit rocked the shuttle. More warning lights flashed across the control panel. We need to find somewhere closer, Vriella said, studying the navigation display. Her eyes fixed on a planet near the edge of the system. There, Garros. Lieutenant Mavis looked horrified. Your Highness, Garros is a wasteland. It's been uninhabitable since the mining collapse a century ago. Which means the Void Phantoms won't expect us to go there, Vriella countered. And they'll have no support structure on the surface. Before Lieutenant Mavis could argue further, a direct hit to their engines made the decision for them. The shuttle lurched, losing power rapidly. We won't make it anywhere else now, Lieutenant Mavis acknowledged, adjusting their course toward the desolate planet. But Garros has electromagnetic storms that will fry our systems if we're not careful. Better the storms than the phantoms, Vriella said, glancing back toward the medical bay where Garrett lay. How is he? Lieutenant Mavis checked the medical readout. Stable, but critical. The shuttle's medical facilities are basic at best. He needs advanced care. Vriella's bioluminescent freckles dimmed with worry. Then, we'll have to find help on Garros. Your Highness, Lieutenant Mavis said gently. Garros was abandoned decades ago. There is no help there. Another hit from their pursuers ended the conversation as both women focused on the increasingly difficult task of keeping the damaged shuttle flying. They entered Garros's turbulent atmosphere at too steep an angle, the shuttle's failing shields barely protecting them from burning up on entry. The landscape that rushed up to meet them was a bleak vista of jagged mountains and vast, energy-scarred deserts, the legacy of the catastrophic mining accident that had rendered the once vibrant colony planet uninhabitable. Lieutenant Mavis fought the controls as they plummeted toward the surface. Brace for impact. The shuttle skidded across a rocky plateau, throwing up a massive plume of dust before coming to rest at the edge of a deep ravine. For a long moment, silence reigned inside the battered craft. Vriella unstrapped herself, ignoring the pain from various cuts and bruises. Lieutenant? Mavis groaned, regaining consciousness. Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead, but she seemed otherwise intact. I'm all right, Your Highness. Both women turned their attention to the external sensors, watching anxiously for signs of their pursuers. The shuttle systems were failing rapidly, but they could still detect the Void Phantom interceptors circling high above. The electromagnetic interference is preventing them from getting a precise fix on us, Lieutenant Mavis observed. But they'll send ground teams to search. Vriella moved quickly to the medical bay, where Garrett remained unconscious. The crash had knocked him from the medical bed, and she carefully repositioned him, checking the readouts on the medical scanner. His condition is deteriorating, she said, her voice tight with fear. The quantum disruption is affecting his cellular structure. Lieutenant Mavis joined her, examining the readouts with a grim expression. These medical supplies won't be enough. He needs a proper regeneration chamber. Vriella closed her eyes briefly, centering herself as she'd been taught since childhood. When she opened them again, determination had replaced fear. Gather whatever supplies you can salvage, she ordered. Food, water, weapons, medical kits. We need to move away from the shuttle before the phantoms find us. As Lieutenant Mavis began collecting supplies, Vriella carefully disconnected Garrett from the medical monitors. Using emergency med patches, she stabilized his condition as best she could, then prepared a makeshift stretcher from pieces of the shuttle's interior paneling. Outside, the first rumbles of an electromagnetic storm could be heard approaching from the east. The sky had taken on an ominous purple-green hue, and static electricity crackled in the air. We need to find shelter, Lieutenant Mavis said, returning with 2 packed survival kits. That storm will be on us within an hour. Together, they managed to secure Garrett to the makeshift stretcher and exit the ruined shuttle. The landscape around them was alien and hostile. Sharp rock formations jutted from the ground like accusing fingers, and the soil beneath their feet was strangely iridescent, contaminated by the energy released from the mining disaster. Lieutenant Mavis consulted a portable scanner. There appears to be a network of caves about 2 kilometers to the west. They might provide shelter from both the storm and orbital scans. Vriella nodded, taking one end of Garrett's stretcher, while Mavis took the other. They set off across the barren terrain, each step raising small clouds of metallic dust that clung to their clothing and skin. The going was slow and arduous. Despite her royal upbringing, Vriella was no stranger to physical exertion. All Elorian nobility were trained in survival and combat from a young age. But the combined weight of the stretcher, the rough terrain, and the increasing electromagnetic interference made for exhausting progress. Halfway to the caves, the storm overtook them. It wasn't like any storm Vriella had ever experienced. There was no rain, only violent wind carrying particles that stung like needles when they struck exposed skin, and surges of electromagnetic energy that made her bioluminescent freckles flash painfully. "We can't make it to the caves," Lieutenant Mavis shouted over the howling wind. "We need shelter now." Vriella scanned their surroundings desperately. About 50 meters away, a cluster of rock formations created a natural alcove. "There!" They changed direction, struggling against the wind toward the rocky shelter. By the time they reached it, both women were gasping for breath, their skin raw from the stinging particles. The alcove wasn't deep, but it provided enough protection for them to set down the stretcher and catch their breath. Vriella immediately checked on Garrett. His breathing was shallow, and his skin had taken on a bluish tinge that alarmed her. "The quantum disruption is spreading through his system," she said, applying another med patch to his chest. "We're losing him." Lieutenant Mavis surveyed their meager supplies with a critical eye. "The medical kit has some broad-spectrum stabilizers, but nothing specifically designed for quantum exposure, and certainly nothing tailored for human physiology." Vriella's freckles pulsed with determination. "Apply the stabilizers. They might slow the progression, at least." As Mavis administered the treatment, Vriella used their portable scanner to study their surroundings more carefully. The electromagnetic storm made the readings erratic, but something caught her attention. "There's an energy signature about half a kilometer from here," she said, frowning at the scanner. "It's faint, but it's definitely artificial." Lieutenant Mavis looked up sharply. "Void phantoms." "I don't think so. It's too stable, too established." Vriella adjusted the scanner settings. "It looks like it might be a power source. A generator, perhaps?" Hope flared between them. If there was power, there might be shelter, maybe even communications equipment. "We should investigate as soon as the storm passes," Lieutenant Mavis suggested. Vriella nodded in agreement, then turned her attention back to Garrett. She placed her hand gently on his forehead, a gesture she'd seen human medical personnel use to check for fever. His skin burned beneath her touch. "Hold on, Garrett," she whispered. "Just hold on." The storm raged for 3 hours, before finally moving on, leaving behind an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional distant rumble of thunder. The sky remained an unnatural green-purple, casting everything in a sickly light. "He can't be moved again," Lieutenant Mavis said, checking Garrett's vital signs. "The stabilizers are barely keeping him alive as it is." Vriella made a quick decision. "I'll investigate the energy signature. You stay here with him." "Your Highness, I cannot allow you to go alone," Lieutenant Mavis protested. "My duty is to protect you." "And mine is to my people, including Garrett," Vriella countered firmly. "He risked everything to save me. I won't abandon him now." She softened her tone slightly. "Besides, you're the better medic. He needs your skills more than I need your protection at the moment." Reluctantly, Lieutenant Mavis conceded. She handed Vriella a small energy pistol and the portable scanner. Be careful, Your Highness. Garos was abandoned for good reason. The mining disaster left more than just environmental damage. Variella nodded grimly, securing the weapon at her hip. The ceremonial gown she'd worn for the parade was now torn and filthy, hardly suitable for an expedition across harsh terrain, but she had no alternative. "I'll be back as soon as I can," she promised, casting one last look at Garrett before setting out. The landscape seemed even more desolate after the storm. The metallic dust had been swept into fantastical formations, creating an alien topography that shifted slightly with each gust of wind. Variella followed the scanner's readings, picking her way carefully across the treacherous ground. As she drew closer to the energy signature, she began to notice other signs of habitation, faint paths worn into the rocky soil, the occasional piece of discarded equipment half buried in the dust. Someone had been here, and recently. The energy source turned out to be coming from the entrance to what appeared to be an old mining facility, partially collapsed and reclaimed by the hostile environment. A crude force field shimmered across the entrance, keeping the metallic dust at bay. Variella approached cautiously, scanning for any signs of surveillance or defense systems. Finding none, she studied the force field generator. It was a surprisingly sophisticated piece of equipment for an abandoned planet. Jury-rigged but effective. There was no obvious way to deactivate it from the outside. After considering her options, Variella decided on the direct approach. She unholstered her energy pistol and aimed it at what appeared to be the power coupling for the force field. Before she could fire, a voice called out from behind her. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Variella whirled around, pistol raised. A man stood about 10 meters away, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. He appeared to be human, though his skin had an odd, grayish cast to it, and he wore what looked like a modified environmental suit. "Who are you?" Variella demanded, not lowering her weapon. "Someone who, like you, found himself stranded on this delightful planet," the man replied with a sardonic smile. "The name's Ishan Korin." Variella's eyes narrowed. "You're Alorian." The name was definitely of her species, though his appearance was confusingly human-like. "Half," he corrected. "My mother was human. Hence the lack of, shall we say, distinctive features." He gestured at his face, which indeed lacked the luminescent freckles and elongated features typical of Alorians. "What are you doing here?" Variella asked, still suspicious. "Surviving, primarily," Ishan answered. He studied her torn ceremonial clothing with newfound interest. "Those are royal colors. You're from the palace." Variella made a split-second decision. "I need medical help. My companion was injured in a shuttle crash." Ishan's expression grew serious. "What kind of injury?" "Quantum disruption. He's human, and he took a direct hit from a disruptor meant for me." Ishan whistled softly. "Quantum disruption in a human? It's a miracle he's still alive." He hesitated, then added, "I might be able to help. I was a medical engineer before. Well, before I ended up here." Hope surged in Variella's chest. "You have medical equipment?" "Some. Salvaged from various sources. Nothing like a royal medical center, but better than dying in a storm." He gestured toward the force field. "I can bring him here. Treat him." Variella hesitated, weighing her options. Trusting the stranger was a risk, but Garrett was dying. She had little choice. "I need to see your facility first," she said firmly. Ishan shrugged. "Fair enough." He approached the force field and tapped a sequence on a concealed panel. The field shimmered and created an opening just large enough to pass through. "After you, Your Highness." Variella's eyes widened slightly at the formal address. "The royal crest on your collar," Ishan explained, noticing her surprise. "You're Princess Variella." She didn't deny it, simply inclining her head slightly as she passed through the force field opening. keeping a careful distance from Ishan. Inside, the abandoned mining facility had been converted into a surprisingly well-equipped living space. Salvage technology lined the walls, and a collection of storage containers had been repurposed into furniture. But it was the medical equipment in the corner that drew Variella's attention. A functional, if makeshift, treatment area with monitoring devices and what appeared to be a modified stasis chamber. "You've been preparing for visitors?" she asked, gesturing at the equipment. "Let's just say I like to be prepared for contingencies," Ishan replied. "The equipment is functional. It's kept me alive through several exposures to the electromagnetic storms." Variella made her decision. "I'll bring him here, but Lieutenant Mavis comes too." "The more the merrier," Ishan said with a sardonic smile. "Though I should warn you, the Void Phantoms have patrols on the surface now. They're searching for someone. You, I presume." Variella's expression hardened. "You know about the Void Phantoms?" "I monitor all communications I can intercept," Ishan explained. "It's how I keep informed about the outside world. Their chatter increased dramatically about 6 hours ago, right around the time your shuttle would have crashed." "Can you help us avoid them?" Variella asked. Ishan nodded. "I know this area better than they ever will, but we should move quickly. The next electromagnetic storm is due in about 4 hours, and we don't want to be caught outside when it hits." Together, they set out to retrieve Garrett and Lieutenant Mavis. As they traversed the alien landscape, Variella studied their unlikely savior. There was something familiar about him, something she couldn't quite place. "You said you were a medical engineer," she prompted. "Where did you work?" "The Royal Science Academy, actually," Ishan replied. "I specialized in xenobiology, the study of cross-species medical treatment." Variella stopped abruptly. "You're Ishan Koren, the researcher who disappeared during the Civil War. You were working on biological interface technology for cross-species neural networks." A flicker of surprise crossed Ishan's face. "I'm flattered the princess knows my work." "My father spoke highly of you," Variella said. "Your disappearance was considered a significant loss to the scientific community." Ishan's expression darkened. "I didn't disappear. I was exiled." "Exiled? On whose authority? The Science Council has no such power." "No," Ishan agreed. "But the Military Intelligence Directorate does, especially during wartime." Before Variella could question him further, they crested a ridge and came within sight of the rock alcove where she had left Garrett and Lieutenant Mavis. The lieutenant spotted them immediately, rising to her feet with her weapon drawn. "It's all right," Variella called out. "He's here to help." Lieutenant Mavis lowered her weapon slightly, but remained visibly tense as they approached. Her eyes narrowed when she saw Ishan. "You're Alorian?" "Enough of me is," Ishan replied cryptically. He moved past her to examine Garrett, his expression growing grave as he assessed the human's condition. "The quantum disruption has spread through 60% of his cellular structure. We need to get him to my facility immediately." Together, the three of them lifted Garrett onto the stretcher and began the journey back to Ishan's hidden base. The going was slower this time, with all three taking turns to carry the stretcher across the difficult terrain. "The next storm is approaching from the north," Ishan warned as they walked. "We need to pick up the pace." They had covered about half the distance when Lieutenant Mavis suddenly signaled for them to stop. "Listen," she whispered. In the eerie silence of the Garros wasteland, the faint hum of engines could be heard approaching. "Void Phantom scoutcraft," Ishan confirmed, his expression grim. "They're sweeping the area with quantum resonance scanners. They'll detect your shuttle's energy signature, and possibly ours as well." "Cover!" Lieutenant Mavis hissed, and they quickly moved the stretcher behind a large rock formation, pressing themselves against the stone as the scoutcraft passed overhead. For a tense minute, they remained motionless, barely breathing as the craft circled the area. Then, to their horror, it began to descend about 200 meters from their position. They've detected something, Ishan murmured. Possibly the residual quantum energy from his exposure. He nodded toward Garrett. Lieutenant Mavis unholstered her weapon. Your Highness, continue to the facility with Ishan and Garrison Commander Stone. I'll create a diversion. No, Vriella said firmly. We stay together. Actually, Ishan interjected, I have a better idea. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small device. Quantum resonance duplicator. It'll create a false signature that matches his energy pattern. He nodded at Garrett. I can set it to activate about 1 kilometer south of here. Should draw them away long enough for us to reach the facility. Lieutenant Mavis looked skeptical, but Variella nodded. Do it. Ishan quickly programmed the device and activated it. A small drone, no larger than his palm, detached from the device and sped off to the south, staying low to the ground to avoid detection. Within minutes, the scout craft changed course, pursuing the false signal. The trio wasted no time, resuming their journey with increased urgency. They reached Ishan's hidden base just as the distant rumble of the approaching storm began to grow louder. Once inside, they quickly transferred Garrett to the makeshift medical area. I need to stabilize him before the storm hits, Ishan explained, activating various pieces of equipment. The electromagnetic interference will make precise treatment impossible. Vriella and Lieutenant Mavis watched anxiously as Ishan worked, connecting Garrett to monitoring devices and preparing solutions in a jury-rigged synthesizer. What exactly happened to him? Ishan asked as he worked. Vriella explained about the assassination attempt during the Unity Parade and how Garrett had shielded her from the quantum disruptor. Quantum disruptors are specifically calibrated for Elorian physiology, Ishan noted. They target the bioelectric field that's unique to our species. Humans don't have that field, which is why they're not supposed to be affected. He frowned. But at close range, the quantum energy could disrupt any organic cellular structure, regardless of species. Can you help him? Vriella asked, her voice tight with worry. Ishan didn't answer immediately, concentrating on administering a greenish solution through an intravenous line into Garrett's arm. This will help stabilize the quantum fluctuations in his cellular structure, he explained. But it's only temporary. The damage is extensive. Lieutenant Mavis, who had been checking the perimeter defenses, rejoined them. The storm is almost upon us, and I've detected more scout craft in the area. They're establishing a search grid. They're persistent, Ishan remarked. They must want you badly, Princess. Not just me, Variella replied. The attack targeted both my father and me. It was a coordinated attempt to destabilize the royal family. And with it, the peace between Elorians and humans, Lieutenant Mavis added grimly. Ishan's expression was unreadable as he continued his treatment of Garrett. The Void Phantoms were always opposed to integration with humans. They believe Elorians should maintain genetic purity. You speak as if you know them well, Lieutenant Mavis observed, her tone suspicious. Ishan shrugged. Know thy enemy. I've intercepted enough of their communications over the years to understand their ideology. He completed the treatment and stepped back from Garrett. That's all I can do for now. We'll know in a few hours if it's working. The facility's lights flickered as the electromagnetic storm reached them. Its fury muted, but still palpable through the shielding. The three of them settled in to wait. Lieutenant Mavis taking the first watch, while Variella remained by Garrett's side. You care for him, Ishan observed quietly, joining her after checking his equipment. Variella didn't deny it. He has served the royal family with unwavering loyalty for 4 years. He saved my life today. And you intend to return the favor, Ishan said. It wasn't a question. I do, Vriella confirmed, her freckles pulsing with determination. Ishan studied her for a long moment. You remind me of your mother, he finally said. She had the same strength of will. Vriella looked up in surprise. You knew my mother? I did, Ishan nodded. Before the war, I was frequently at the palace for research consultations. Queen Nerissa was a patron of the sciences. She understood the importance of building bridges between species. She died when I was very young, Variella said softly. I have few memories of her. She would be proud of you, Ishan said, and for the first time, his sardonic demeanor fell away, revealing genuine emotion. Carrying on her work of unity. Their conversation was interrupted by a groan from Garrett. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. Garrett? Variella leaned forward, hope surging in her chest. He blinked several times, his gaze gradually focusing on her face. Princess? His voice was barely audible, rough with pain. I'm here, she assured him, taking his hand in hers. You're safe. We're on Garos. Confusion clouded his features. Garos? How? He tried to sit up but fell back with a grimace of pain. Don't try to move, Ishan advised, stepping forward to check the monitoring equipment. The quantum disruption has affected your muscular control. Garrett's eyes darted to Ishan, instantly alert despite his weakened state. Who are you? A friend, Variella answered before Ishan could speak. He's helping us. Garrett seemed to struggle to process this information, his gaze moving between Variella and Ishan. The parade. There was an attack. Yes, Variella confirmed. You saved my life. A shadow of relief crossed Garrett's face, followed quickly by concern. The Emperor? Safe, as far as we know. Lieutenant Mavis reported from her position by the entrance. The palace guard evacuated him through a different route. Garrett nodded slightly, then winced at the movement. The Void Phantoms? Searching for us, Variella told him. But we're hidden for now. Garrett's eyes began to drift closed again, the brief surge of consciousness fading. Need to protect Princess, he murmured before slipping back into unconsciousness. Ishan checked the monitors again. His neural patterns are erratic. The quantum disruption is affecting his brain function. But he woke up, Variella said, clinging to that positive sign. That means he's improving, doesn't it? Ishan's expression was guarded. It means the stabilizer is working, temporarily, but the underlying damage continues to spread. He hesitated, then added, Princess, I need to be honest with you. Without more advanced treatment, he won't survive more than a day or two. The words fell like stones into Variella's heart. Then we need to get him off Garos, back to Eloria, to a proper medical facility. The Void Phantoms have this area surrounded, Lieutenant Mavis pointed out, and our shuttle is damaged beyond repair. There must be a way, Variella insisted, her freckles pulsing with determination. Ishan was silent for a long moment, his expression conflicted. Finally, he spoke. There might be a way, not off Garos, but to get him the treatment he needs. Both women turned to him expectantly. I told you I was working on biological interface technology before my departure from Eloria, Ishan continued. What I didn't mention was how far the research had progressed. He moved to a storage container in the corner of the room and unlocked it with a complex sequence of gestures. From inside, he withdrew a small, crystalline device that pulsed with a soft blue light. This is a prototype of the BioBridge. It was designed to allow neural interface between Elorians and other species, facilitating deeper understanding and cooperation. Lieutenant Mavis eyed the device suspiciously. How does this help Garrison Commander Stone? The BioBridge works by harmonizing quantum signatures between different physiologies, Ishan explained. In theory, it could be modified to stabilize the quantum disruption in his cells. In theory? Variella repeated, her tone sharp. Ishan didn't flinch from her gaze. It's never been tested in this specific application, but the principles are sound. It's his best chance. And the risks? Lieutenant Mavis asked. Significant, Ishan admitted. The process could accelerate the quantum degradation instead of halting it. And even if it works, there might be side effects. What kind of side effects? Vriella demanded. Ishan hesitated. The bio-bridge creates a fundamental connection at the quantum level. It could alter aspects of his physiology, his consciousness. He might not be entirely human afterward. Silence fell over the room as Vriella and Lieutenant Mavis absorbed this information. Outside, the electromagnetic storm continued to rage, casting strange, shifting shadows through the few viewports. It should be his choice, Lieutenant Mavis finally said. He's in no condition to make that choice, Ishan countered. And by the time he is, if he ever is, it will be too late. Vriella stared down at Garrett's pale face, conflicted. She had no right to make this decision for him, to potentially change the very essence of who he was. Yet the alternative was to watch him die, knowing she might have saved him. If we were on Aloria, what would the royal physicians recommend? She asked. Lieutenant Mavis considered the question. For quantum disruption this severe, in a human, they would likely say the case was hopeless. So this truly is his only chance, Vriella murmured. Yes, Ishan confirmed. But I need to be clear. Princess, this goes beyond normal medical treatment. The bio-bridge was classified as restricted technology by the Military Intelligence Directorate. Using it this way would violate at least 3 imperial edicts. Vriella's expression hardened. I am a member of the imperial family. I can authorize its use. Can you? Ishan challenged, his tone suddenly sharp. The edicts specifically prohibit cross-species genetic modification without Senate approval. Even the royal family is bound by these laws. I'm not concerned with legalities right now, Vriella retorted. Only with saving his life. Your Highness, Lieutenant Mavis interjected cautiously. I understand your feelings, but we must consider the wider implications. If word got out that you authorized forbidden technology to be used on a human, the fragile peace could shatter, Ishan finished for her. The very thing the Void Phantoms are trying to achieve. Vriella stood abruptly, her freckles flashing with anger. So I should let him die? After he sacrificed himself to save me? She looked from Mavis to Ishan. What kind of leader would that make me? What kind of person? Neither had an immediate answer. Vriella took a deep breath, centering herself as she'd been taught. Prepare the bio-bridge, she ordered Ishan. I take full responsibility for this decision. Ishan studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. It will take several hours to calibrate the device for this specific application, and I'll need samples of both his tissue and yours. Mine? Vriella questioned. The bio-bridge creates a quantum resonance between 2 biological entities, Ishan explained. It needs a template, a stable quantum signature to use as a reference point. Since he was exposed to a disruptor calibrated for Alorian physiology, your signature is the logical choice. Understanding dawned on Vriella. The treatment will make him more like an Alorian? To some degree, Ishan confirmed. How much? I can't say. The technology is still experimental. Vriella looked down at Garrett once more, then extended her arm to Ishan. Take what you need. As Ishan began collecting samples and preparing the bio-bridge, Lieutenant Mavis pulled Vriella aside. Your Highness, I must formally register my concern with this course of action. Noted, Lieutenant, Vriella replied calmly. It's not just the legal implications, Mavis continued. Garrison Commander Stone is a man dedicated to duty and protocol. How will he feel, waking up to find himself changed without his consent? It was the question Vriella had been asking herself, the doubt that gnawed at her resolve. He may hate me for it, she acknowledged, but he'll be alive to do so. Lieutenant Mavis seemed about to argue further, but was interrupted by an alert from the facility's perimeter sensors. She moved quickly to check the monitoring station. Void Phantom Ground Forces, she reported tensely. They've established a position about 1 kilometer from here. Ishan looked up from his work. They can't detect us through the shielding, but they're establishing a perimeter. They know we're somewhere in this area. How long until the biobridge is ready? Vuriella asked. 4 hours, minimum, Ishan replied. The calibration is delicate work. And Garrett? Ishan checked the medical monitors. The stabilizer is losing effectiveness faster than I anticipated. His quantum signature is becoming increasingly chaotic. He hesitated, then added, He may not have 4 hours. Vuriella felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. After coming so far, after finding this unlikely hope, to lose him now. There is another option, Ishan said hesitantly. A temporary measure. Both women looked at him expectantly. I could attempt a direct quantum harmonization, essentially, a crude version of what the biobridge will do. Ishan explained. It would stabilize him enough to survive until the device is ready. Why didn't you mention this before? Lieutenant Mavis demanded. Because it requires a direct quantum donor, Ishan said, his gaze fixed on Vuriella. Someone with a stable Elorian quantum signature would need to physically connect to his bioelectric field, essentially, letting their own field extend to encompass him. It's dangerous for the donor. How dangerous? Vuriella asked. It could temporarily destabilize your own quantum signature, Ishan warned. You'd experience disorientation, possibly hallucinations. In extreme cases, temporary cellular degradation. But it would save him? It would buy him time, Ishan corrected. Nothing more. Vuriella didn't hesitate. Show me what to do. Despite Lieutenant Mavis's protests, Ishan quickly prepared for the procedure. He positioned Vuriella beside Garrett's unconscious form and attached monitoring devices to both of them. You'll need to maintain physical contact throughout the process, he instructed, guiding her hands to rest on Garrett's temples. Focus your thoughts on stability, on wholeness. Your bioelectric field will respond to your mental state. Vuriella nodded, closing her eyes as she placed her hands gently on either side of Garrett's face. She concentrated on memories of strength, of wellness. Garrett standing tall in the palace gardens, his expression alert and vigilant. Garrett demonstrating combat techniques to younger guards, his movements precise and powerful. Garrett smiling, a rare occurrence. When she had mastered a particularly difficult diplomatic protocol, he had helped her practice. Good, Ishan murmured, monitoring the readings. Now, I'm going to apply a small electromagnetic pulse to synchronize your quantum signatures. It may feel unusual. Vuriella braced herself. The pulse, when it came, felt like liquid fire flowing through her veins. She gasped, but maintained her position, hands steady on Garrett's temples. Your bioelectric field is extending to encompass his cellular structure, Ishan reported. The quantum disruption is beginning to stabilize. Vuriella could feel it, a strange sensation of connection, as if some part of her consciousness was flowing into Garrett. She could sense the chaotic energy of the quantum disruption, the damaged cells struggling to maintain cohesion. Instinctively, she pushed her own energy toward those damaged areas, willing them to heal, to stabilize. The process was exhausting, draining her in a way she had never experienced. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and her bioluminescent freckles began to pulse erratically. Princess, your own readings are becoming unstable, Lieutenant Mavis warned, watching the monitors with concern. Keep going, Vuriella insisted through gritted teeth. Is it working? Yes, Ishan confirmed, his voice betraying a hint of amazement. His quantum signature is synchronizing with yours at a remarkable rate. Better than I anticipated. The minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. Vuriella remained focused, though the strain was evident in her trembling hands and pale complexion. Lieutenant Mavis alternated between monitoring the perimeter defenses and checking on the princess, her concern growing with each passing minute. Finally, just as Vuriella felt she could maintain the connection no longer, Ishan announced. That's enough. His signature has stabilized sufficiently. Vriella reluctantly broke the connection, sagging with exhaustion. Lieutenant Mavis was immediately at her side, supporting her. How is he? Vriella asked, her voice weak. Ishan checked the monitors. Stable, for now. You've bought him the time we need to complete the biobridge calibration. He looked at her with newfound respect. That was impressive, Princess. Your bioelectric control is exceptional. Rest now, Your Highness, Lieutenant Mavis urged, helping Vriella to a makeshift bed in the corner of the room. Wake me if there's any change, Vriella instructed, her eyelids already growing heavy. Or if the void phantoms approach. Of course, Lieutenant Mavis promised. As Vriella drifted into an exhausted sleep, Ishan and Lieutenant Mavis exchanged a look over her unconscious form. She risked a great deal for him, Ishan observed quietly. He would do the same for her, Lieutenant Mavis replied. Has done the same. Ishan turned back to his work on the biobridge, his expression thoughtful. Such loyalty is rare between our species. Perhaps not as rare as you think, Lieutenant Mavis countered. The alliance has grown stronger since the war ended. Has it? Ishan's tone was skeptical. Or has the conflict simply gone underground, festering like the void phantoms? Lieutenant Mavis had no answer for that. She returned to monitoring the perimeter, her thoughts troubled. 3 hours later, Vriella awoke to Ishan, gently shaking her shoulder. Princess, the biobridge is ready, but we have a problem. Vriella sat up quickly, wincing at the lingering weakness in her limbs. What is it? The void phantoms are converging on this location, Lieutenant Mavis reported from the monitoring station. They must have detected some energy signature from our equipment. Vriella moved to check on Garrett. His condition had improved slightly. His color was better, and his breathing more regular. But the monitors still showed dangerous instability in his quantum signature. How long will the biobridge procedure take? She asked Ishan. About 30 minutes, he replied. But it requires significant energy. Once I activate it, the power signature will be impossible to hide from their scanners. And if we wait until they move on? Ishan shook his head. They're not moving on. They're establishing a search pattern, closing in systematically. And his condition, while better, is still deteriorating. Vriella made a quick decision. Begin the procedure immediately. Lieutenant Mavis and I will prepare defenses. Lieutenant Mavis nodded grimly, already checking her weapon. I count at least 8 void phantoms approaching from the north and east. The facility has some automated defenses, but they won't hold for long. They'll have to hold long enough, Vriella said, retrieving her own energy pistol. She turned to Ishan. What do you need us to do? Ishan had already begun connecting the crystalline biobridge device to Garrett. Keep them off us for 30 minutes. After that, either the procedure will have worked, or... He left the alternative unspoken. Vriella nodded, understanding the stakes. Lieutenant, show me the defensive systems. Mavis led her to a control panel near the entrance. The facility has energy shields and some basic weapons emplacements, leftovers from the mining operation, modified by Ishan. They're outdated but functional. Together, they activated the outer defenses. Almost immediately, alarms sounded as the approaching void phantoms were detected by the system. They're moving faster now, Lieutenant Mavis observed. They've definitely detected us. In the center of the facility, Ishan activated the biobridge. The crystalline device began to pulse with increasing intensity, bathing Garrett in a soft blue light that gradually shifted to a more vibrant indigo. Phase 1 initiated, Ishan announced. Quantum resonance mapping in progress. Outside, the first sounds of combat reached them, the distinctive whine of energy weapons impacting the facility's shields. Shields at 80%, Lieutenant Mavis reported. Automated defenses engaging. Vriella moved to a viewport, observing the attacking forces. The void phantoms lived up to their name. their phase-shifting technology, allowing them to flicker in and out of solidity, making them difficult targets for the automated weapons. "Can we increase power to the southeastern quadrant?" she asked. "They're concentrating their attack there." Lieutenant Mavis adjusted the controls, redirecting shield energy. "That will weaken our northern exposure." "They're testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses," Variella observed. Classic Void Phantom tactics. A particularly powerful blast rocked the facility, causing equipment to rattle and lights to flicker momentarily. "Phase cannon," Lieutenant Mavis identified grimly. "They've brought heavy weaponry." "How long has it been?" Variella called to Ishan. 10 minutes, he replied, not looking up from his work. "The biobridge is establishing initial quantum synchronization. We can't stop now." Another blast hit the facility, stronger than the first. Warning lights flashed across the defense control panel. "Northern shield failing," Lieutenant Mavis reported. "They've found our weak point." Variella made a quick decision. "Reroute emergency power to the northern shield. I'll take position there with a weapon." "Your Highness, I cannot allow you to place yourself in direct danger," Lieutenant Mavis protested. "This isn't a debate, Lieutenant," Variella replied firmly. "If they breach that section, we all die." Reluctantly, Lieutenant Mavis handed over her secondary weapon, a more powerful energy rifle. "I'll continue to coordinate the automated defenses from here." Variella moved quickly to the northern section of the facility, taking position behind a makeshift barricade. Through a narrow viewport, she could see the Void Phantoms advancing, their phase-shifting technology making them appear as flickering shadows against the harsh Garos landscape. As she watched, one of the figures solidified long enough to aim a heavy phase cannon at her position. Variella ducked just as the blast hit, tearing through the weakened shield and punching a hole in the facility's outer wall. Alarms blared throughout the structure. Variella steadied her rifle against the barricade and began firing through the breach, forcing the Void Phantoms to phase shift rapidly, disrupting their attack. "How much longer?" she shouted into her communicator. 15 more minutes. Ishan's voice came back, tense with concentration. "The quantum integration is at a critical phase. Any interruption now could be catastrophic." Variella continued firing, keeping the attackers at bay, but they were adaptable, adjusting their phase shifting to a pattern that made them harder to target. One managed to materialize partially through the breach, firing an energy weapon that scorched the wall, just centimeters from Variella's head. She adjusted her position and returned fire, catching the Phantom mid-shift. The attacker let out an inhuman cry as the energy beam disrupted their phasing technology, forcing them into solid form. They collapsed, their stealth suits smoking. But more were coming. Through the breach, Variella could see at least 5 more advancing on her position, with others circling to attack different sections of the facility. "Lieutenant, southeastern quadrant," she warned into her communicator. "Already on it," Mavis replied tersely. "But our automated defenses are failing. Power reserves at 30%. Another blast rocked the facility, this one from the east. Variella heard Ishan curse as equipment crashed to the floor. "Status?" she demanded. "Continuing," he responded. 10 more minutes." Variella fired repeatedly through the breach, but the Void Phantoms were too many. One materialized directly behind her, having phased through a solid wall. She sensed the movement too late and felt a burning pain as an energy weapon grazed her shoulder. Whirling, she fired at point-blank range, catching her attacker in the chest. They crumpled, but the breach in her defenses had been costly. 2 more Phantoms forced their way into the facility through the damaged northern wall. Lieutenant Mavis appeared at the other end of the corridor, firing with precision. One of the intruders fell, but the other phased out momentarily, avoiding the blast. "Fall back to the central chamber," Mavis shouted. "We can't hold the perimeter." Variella retreated, firing as she went. Together, she and Mavis made it back to the central area, where Ishan worked feverishly over Garrett. The biobridge was now pulsing rapidly, the blue indigo light so bright It was almost painful to look at directly. 5 more minutes, Ishan said without looking up. The quantum restructuring is nearly complete. We may not have 5 minutes, Lieutenant Mavis warned, taking position at the entrance to the chamber. They've breached the facility in multiple locations. Vriella joined her, both women creating a last line of defense. The sounds of the Void Phantoms moving through the facility echoed down the corridors, the distinctive hum of their phase-shifting technology, the clatter of equipment being overturned in their search. Why haven't they used their phase technology to come directly into this room? Vriella wondered aloud. The biobridge, Ishan answered, still focused on his work. The quantum field it's generating disrupts their phase shifting. They can't shift through it. That explained their strategy. They were searching for another way in. A physical entrance. Almost there, Ishan announced. Final quantum integration initiating. The light from the biobridge intensified to near-blinding levels, filling the chamber with pulsating energy. Vriella and Lieutenant Mavis shielded their eyes, maintaining their defensive positions with difficulty. Then, suddenly, multiple Void Phantoms appeared at the chamber entrance, having found their way through the facility. They opened fire immediately. Vriella and Mavis returned fire, but they were outnumbered. Energy blasts scorched the walls around them, and one caught Lieutenant Mavis in the leg. She went down with a cry of pain. "Mavis!" Vriella moved to cover her fallen comrade, firing rapidly to keep the attackers at bay. "The procedure is complete," Ishan shouted over the chaos. "But he needs time to stabilize." A massive blast shook the chamber as the Void Phantoms deployed another phase cannon. Part of the ceiling collapsed, showering them with debris. Vriella was thrown to the ground, her weapon skittering away across the floor. As she struggled to rise, she saw Garrett's eyes flutter open on the medical bed. He looked disoriented, his gaze unfocused. But as the sounds of battle registered, something changed in his expression, a return of awareness, of purpose. In a movement that shouldn't have been possible for someone in his condition, Garrett swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood. His body seemed to shimmer slightly, a faint, indigo luminescence visible beneath his skin. "Garrett?" Vriella called, uncertainty and hope mingling in her voice. He turned toward her, and she gasped. His eyes, once gray, now held the same indigo luminescence that suffused his skin. He looked at her, recognition dawning. "Princess," he said, his voice rough but strong. "Get behind me." Before she could respond, more Void Phantoms poured into the chamber. Garrett moved with inhuman speed, placing himself between the attackers and Vriella. As energy blasts came toward them, he raised his hands instinctively. To everyone's shock, a shimmering field of indigo energy formed between his outstretched hands, absorbing the incoming fire. It was a bioelectric shield, a defensive ability unique to Elorians, one that Garrett, as a human, should not have possessed. "Impossible!" one of the Void Phantoms hissed, momentarily halting their attack. Garrett used their hesitation to advance, the bioelectric shield expanding as he moved. The nearest phantom fired again, but the blast was absorbed completely. "Get the princess out," Garrett ordered Ishan, who had moved to help Lieutenant Mavis. "There's an exit tunnel behind the main power conduit." "How do you know that?" Ishan asked, startled. Garrett didn't answer. Instead, he pushed forward, forcing the Void Phantoms to retreat from the sheer power of the bioelectric field he was projecting. Vriella rushed to help Ishan with Lieutenant Mavis. "We're not leaving without you," she called to Garrett. "I'll hold them off," he replied, not looking back. "Get to safety. That's my duty." The determination in his voice left no room for argument. Vriella helped Ishan maneuver Lieutenant Mavis toward the concealed exit he had indicated. "The biobridge worked better than I could have imagined," Ishan murmured, watching Garrett confronting the Void Phantoms. "He's not just stabilized. He's integrated Elorian abilities." As they reached the hidden exit, Vriella looked back one last time, Garrett stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by void phantoms, his body emanating waves of bioelectric energy that kept them at bay. But she could see more attackers arriving, and even his newfound abilities couldn't hold them all off indefinitely. "Garrett," she called, "come with us." He glanced back briefly, his indigo eyes meeting hers. "Get her to safety," he told Ishan. "That's all that matters." Then he turned back to the Void Phantoms and, in a move of devastating power, released the bioelectric energy he had been accumulating. The resulting blast threw the attackers back, but also caused massive structural damage to the already compromised facility. "Go!" Garrett shouted as the ceiling began to collapse. Ishan pulled Variella through the exit tunnel as the chamber behind them crumbled. The last thing she saw was Garrett, standing tall amidst the chaos, buying them the time they needed to escape. The tunnel led them to a small, concealed hangar, where a battered but functional shuttle waited. "You had an escape plan all along," Lieutenant Mavis observed, as Ishan helped her aboard. "I've survived on Garos this long by always having a contingency," Ishan replied. He turned to Variella, who stood staring back at the tunnel entrance. "Princess, we need to leave now. The facility's power core will overload soon." "We can't leave him," Variella insisted, her voice breaking. "He made his choice," Ishan said gently, "to protect you, as he swore to do." Tears streamed down Variella's face, her bioluminescent freckles dimming with grief. "He didn't deserve this fate." "No," Ishan agreed, "but he chose it willingly." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Princess, his sacrifice will be meaningless if you don't survive." With heart-wrenching reluctance, Variella allowed herself to be guided aboard the shuttle. As Ishan initiated the launch sequence, the ground beneath them trembled with the force of multiple explosions from the collapsing facility. The shuttle rose shakily into the Garos atmosphere, its outdated engines straining. Through the viewport, Variella watched as the hidden base was consumed in a massive explosion, the power core detonating, taking with it any evidence of their presence, and Garrett. "There were escape pods in the auxiliary hangar," Ishan mentioned quietly as they gained altitude. "If he reached one in time." But they both knew it was an empty hope. No one could have survived that explosion. Lieutenant Mavis, her leg bandaged but still in pain, reached out to take Variella's hand. "He died as he lived, Your Highness, with honor, protecting those he served." Variella couldn't respond, her grief too overwhelming. She simply nodded, watching as Garos fell away beneath them. "The shuttle's communication system is basic, but functional," Ishan reported. "I've sent an encrypted distress signal to a secure Alliance frequency. Help should arrive within hours." Indeed, they had barely reached Garos's upper atmosphere when the shuttle's sensors detected approaching craft. "Alliance vessels," Lieutenant Mavis confirmed, checking the identification codes. "Your father must have dispatched search teams." Within minutes, they were surrounded by a protective escort of Alliance fighters. Their shuttle guided safely into the hangar bay of a larger vessel. As the shuttle's ramp lowered, Variella was greeted by her father's most trusted advisor, High Commander Thalos. "Princess Variella," he said, bowing deeply. "The Emperor has been beside himself with worry. The entire Alliance has been searching for you." Variella acknowledged him with a nod, too emotionally drained for proper protocol. "Lieutenant Mavis requires medical attention," she said, gesturing to her injured companion. Medical personnel rushed forward to assist Mavis, while other Alliance officers eyed Ishan with suspicion. "This is Ishan Korin," Variella informed High Commander Thalos. "He saved our lives. He is under my protection." Thalos looked surprised but nodded. "As you wish, Your Highness." He hesitated, then asked, "And Garrison Commander Stone?" Variella's freckles dimmed to near invisibility. "He gave his life to ensure our escape." A somber silence fell over the hangar bay. Despite the tensions that sometimes existed between humans and Elorians in the Alliance, Garrett had been well respected among the Imperial forces. "He will be honored as a hero of the Alliance," Thalos promised. The journey back to Eloria was a blur for Viriella. She was reunited with her father, Emperor Thalas, who embraced her with uncharacteristic public emotion. The Void Phantom attack had been thwarted on Eloria, their leadership captured or killed. Only the splinter group that had pursued Viriella to Garros remained unaccounted for, and they were presumed destroyed in the facility explosion. Ishan, despite his status as a former exile, was granted amnesty in recognition of his role in saving the princess. His knowledge of the biobridge technology, however, was classified at the highest level, the Emperor himself ordering all records sealed. A state funeral was held for Garrett Stone, his empty casket draped with both the Elorian royal standard and the flag of Earth. Viriella stood stoically through the ceremony, but those closest to her could see the profound grief in her dimmed freckles and hollow eyes. In the days that followed, Viriella withdrew from public life, spending long hours in quiet contemplation in the palace gardens. It was there that Ishan found her, a week after their return. "Princess," he greeted her, bowing slightly. "I hope I'm not intruding." Viriella gestured for him to join her on the crystal bench. "Not at all. I've been meaning to speak with you." Ishan sat, his expression serious. "About the biobridge." "Yes," Viriella confirmed. "I need to understand exactly what happened to Garrett, how he was able to manifest Elorian abilities so quickly, so powerfully." Ishan was silent for a moment, organizing his thoughts. The quantum disruption he suffered created a unique opportunity. His cellular structure was already in flux, more receptive to the biobridge technology than a normal human would be. But the bioelectric shield, that's an ability that takes Elorian children years to develop. Your direct quantum harmonization may have played a role, Ishan suggested. When you connected with him to stabilize his condition, your own bioelectric patterns may have imprinted on his cellular structure more deeply than anticipated. Viriella considered this. Is there any possibility, any chance at all that he could have survived? Ishan's expression grew somber. "Princess, I witnessed the facility's destruction remotely through the shuttle's sensors. The power core detonation reached temperatures that would vaporize conventional matter, even with his enhanced physiology. But he wasn't conventional anymore, was he?" Viriella pressed. "You said yourself the biobridge altered him at a fundamental level." "Even so," Ishan replied gently, "we must accept the reality of what happened." Viriella's freckles pulsed once, betraying her agitation. "I've been researching Elorian quantum theory in the Royal Archives. There are references to ancient ceremonies, the Zuktet Shen ritual, that speak of quantum resurrection." Ishan straightened, his expression shifting from sympathy to alarm. "Princess, those are myths, religious texts from before the scientific enlightenment. They have no basis in empirical reality." "Don't they?" Viriella challenged. "Our ancestors understood quantum manipulation instinctively, through spirituality, before we developed the technology to measure and control it. The ritual describes a process of quantum entanglement preservation, essentially, maintaining a connection to someone's quantum signature, even after physical death." "Those are dangerous ideas, Your Highness," Ishan warned. "The ecclesiarchy would view such research as heresy." "I'm not concerned with the ecclesiarchy's approval," Viriella replied. "I want your scientific opinion. Is it theoretically possible?" Ishan was silent for a long moment, clearly conflicted. Finally, he sighed. "Theoretically, perhaps, quantum signatures don't simply vanish. They transform. With the biobridge technology and your direct harmonization, there could be enough of his original signature preserved within the quantum fabric to attempt something." Hope flared in Viriella's eyes, her freckles brightening. "Then we must try." "Princess," Ishan cautioned, Even if it were theoretically possible, it would require resources beyond anything I could access. And the risk. I am the Imperial Princess of Eloria, Vriella interrupted. Resources are not an issue. Her expression softened slightly. As for the risk, that is mine to bear. Ishan studied her, seeing the determination in her bearing. This goes beyond scientific ethics, beyond imperial law. The Zuktet Shin ritual, if the texts are to be believed, requires a fundamental quantum exchange. You would be giving part of your own essence to anchor his. I understand, Vriella said simply. Do you? Ishan challenged. Your father would never approve. The royal bloodline. Is my burden to carry? Vriella finished for him. I will not ask my father's permission, nor will I involve him in this. This is my decision alone. Ishan recognized the royal authority in her tone, the same unwavering resolve he had once heard in her mother's voice. Very well, Princess. I will help you research this possibility, but I make no promises about implementation. That conversation had been 2 months ago. Now, standing in the secret laboratory deep beneath the royal palace. Vriella watched as Ishan made final adjustments to the modified biobridge device. The laboratory had once belonged to Queen Nerissa, Variella's mother, who had conducted her own controversial research into cross-species cooperation. It had remained sealed since her death, untouched, until Variella had claimed it for their current work. The quantum resonance chamber is ready, Ishan reported, stepping back from the crystal-lined alcove at the center of the laboratory. I've incorporated elements from both the biobridge technology and the Zuktet Shin ritual descriptions. Variella approached the chamber, examining the intricate network of crystal filaments that lined its interior. At the center floated a small, crystalline orb, the preserved quantum signature they had recovered from the destroyed facility on Garos. It had been Lieutenant Mavis who had made the discovery during the official investigation of the incident. While sorting through sensor data from the shuttle, she had noticed an anomalous quantum pattern in the explosion's aftermath, a signature that matched neither Elorian nor human standard patterns, but contained elements of both. How did you recover this? Variella had asked, when Mavis brought the data to her in private. I didn't, Mavis had replied. It found us. The signature was actively seeking compatible quantum patterns, specifically yours, Your Highness. It's as if some part of Garrison Commander Stone survived and was looking for you. That had been the catalyst for Variella's research into the Zuktet Shin ritual, and for the ambitious project now nearing completion. The ceremony requires specific quantum harmonics, Ishan reminded her, consulting an ancient text displayed on a holographic interface. According to these records, the ritual must be performed during a double full moon, when both of Eloria's moons are in alignment. Tonight, Variella confirmed, her gaze fixed on the floating quantum signature. We proceed as planned. Ishan's expression remained troubled. Princess, I must once more voice my concerns. This ritual has not been performed in over 1,000 years, and never with technology like the biobridge. The risks are mine to take, Variella finished firmly. You've fulfilled your part, Ishan. If you wish to distance yourself from what happens next, I understand. Ishan shook his head. I will see this through, Your Highness. But there's something else you should know. He hesitated, then continued. The ecclesiarchy has begun asking questions. Chief Theologian Varen himself has requested access to the royal archive sections you've been studying. Vriella's freckles pulsed once in surprise. How did they know? The ecclesiarchy has always monitored research into quantum theory, Ishan explained. They believe the manipulation of quantum signatures touches on the sacred, the essence of the soul, as they would put it. Have they spoken to my father? Not yet, from what I can gather. But they will, if they confirm their suspicions. Vriella nodded, absorbing this new complication. Then we must proceed quickly, The ritual begins at midnight. The hours passed with agonizing slowness as final preparations were made. Lieutenant Mavis, now fully recovered from her injuries, stood guard at the laboratory's entrance, ensuring their privacy. The ecclesiarchy will view this as sacrilege, she had warned Variella when first brought into their confidence. They believe only the divine has the right to transform quantum essence. And yet they use quantum manipulation in their own rituals, Variella had countered. The line between science and spirituality has always been blurred for our people. As midnight approached, Variella changed from her royal attire into the ceremonial robes described in the ancient texts, simple garments of crystal-infused fabric that would enhance her natural bioelectric field. Ishan activated the resonance chamber, which began to hum with increasing intensity. The crystalline orb at its center, the preserved quantum signature, pulsed with an indigo light that grew stronger with each passing moment. The alignment is nearly perfect, Ishan reported, monitoring the astronomical data. Both moons will reach their zenith in exactly 3 minutes. Vriella took her position before the chamber, her hands outstretched, as described in the ritual text. Her bioluminescent freckles began to glow with unusual brightness, responding to the heightened quantum energy in the room. "Begin the harmonic sequence," she instructed. Ishan activated the modified biobridge, which began to emit a series of tones, not sound in the conventional sense, but quantum vibrations that resonated with Aelorian physiology. Variella felt the vibrations deep within her cellular structure, aligning her bioelectric field with the pattern described in the ancient texts. As the moons reached perfect alignment overhead, their combined light filtering through the crystal skylight above the laboratory, Variella began to recite the ritual invocation. The words were in Old Aelorian, a language she had studied extensively for this moment. "Zuctet shin evora, quantum eterna," she intoned, her voice taking on a resonant quality as it synchronized with the harmonic sequence. "By light of twin moons, by power of royal blood, I call to the essence scattered, but not lost." The crystalline orb pulsed in response, its indigo light intensifying. Variella could feel the quantum signature within it, reaching out, seeking connection. "I offer anchor and haven," she continued, the ritual words flowing through her as if she had known them all her life. "Essence to essence, pattern to pattern." She stepped forward, entering the resonance chamber. The crystal filaments surrounding her began to glow, creating a network of light that enveloped her form. She reached out, taking the floating orb between her hands. The moment of contact was like lightning striking her nervous system. Variella gasped as the quantum signature within the orb surged into her bioelectric field, merging with her own essence. Images flashed through her mind, fragments of memory that were not her own. Garrett, as a child on Earth, looking up at the stars with wonder. Garrett, in Alliance military training, pushing himself beyond normal human limits. Garrett, seeing her for the first time, feeling a sense of purpose he had never known before. Garrett, in his final moments, facing the void phantoms with newfound power, thinking only of her safety. "Garrett," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Come back to me." The quantum resonance reached its peak, the harmonic sequence aligning perfectly with the double moonlight. Variella felt a wrenching sensation deep within her essence, as if part of her was being drawn out, separated. Outside the chamber, Ishan watched in amazement as the princess's form seemed to split, not physically, but energetically. A second quantum pattern emerged from her bioelectric field, carrying the indigo luminescence they had seen in Garrett after the biobridge procedure. The separated quantum pattern began to coalesce, drawing matter from the specialized medium Ishan had prepared according to the ritual specifications, a substrate of basic elements that could be organized by quantum will into complex biological structures. Slowly, a form took shape within the resonance chamber beside Variella, humanoid, but with subtle differences. The skin held a faint lavender tint, and beneath it, traces of indigo luminescence could be seen pulsing like a heartbeat. Impossible, Ishan breathed, though he was witnessing it with his own eyes. The form solidified further, features becoming distinct. It was Garrett, yet not entirely Garrett. His face retained its human structure, but now bore faint, bioluminescent freckles, similar to Variella's. His closed eyes flickered beneath their lids. The harmonic sequence reached its conclusion as the moons began to move past their perfect alignment. The crystal filaments dimmed, and the intense energy in the chamber gradually subsided. Vriella swayed on her feet, exhausted beyond measure by the quantum exchange. As she started to collapse, the newly formed figure's eyes snapped open, revealing irises of deep indigo that glowed with inner light. With reflexes that seemed superhuman, he caught her before she could fall, supporting her weight effortlessly. "Princess," he said, his voice the same and yet subtly different, carrying a resonant quality similar to Elorian speech. Vriella looked up into those indigo eyes, searching for recognition, for the essence of the man she had known. "Garrett?" He studied her face, his expression a complex mixture of confusion and certainty. "Yes, and no." He looked down at his own hands, noting their slight lavender tint and the faint luminescence beneath the skin. "I remember being Garrett Stone. I remember dying to protect you, but I am, more than I was, different." "The ritual worked," Ishan said in awe, approaching the chamber cautiously. "You've been reborn." "Not reborn," the being that had been Garrett corrected. "Transformed. I retain Garrett's memories, his essence, but my quantum structure has been fundamentally altered." He looked at Variella with sudden understanding. "You gave part of yourself to anchor me, your royal essence." Vriella nodded weakly, still recovering from the intense quantum exchange. "A fair trade for the life you gave for mine." Ishan helped both of them from the resonance chamber, guiding them to prepared recovery beds. "Your physiology appears stable," he told the transformed Garrett after scanning him. "A remarkable hybrid of human and Elorian characteristics." "The first of his kind," Vriella murmured. "Which makes him extremely valuable," came a new voice from the laboratory entrance. "Or extremely dangerous, depending on one's perspective." They turned to see Chief Theologian Varen standing in the doorway, flanked by Lieutenant Mavis, who bore an expression of mingled apology and concern. "Forgive me, Your Highness," Mavis said. "The Chief Theologian arrived with the Emperor's seal. I could not deny him entry." Varen, a tall, elderly Elorian with silver-white skin and intensely luminescent freckles that spoke of pure bloodline, surveyed the laboratory with obvious disapproval. His gaze fixed on the transformed Garrett, narrowing with suspicion. "So it is true," he said. "You have performed the forbidden Zuktet Shin ritual, and with human essence, no less." He shook his head gravely. "Princess Variella, do you understand what you have done? You have contaminated the royal bloodline with human quantum patterns. This is sacrilege of the highest order." Vriella straightened, summoning her remaining strength. "I have saved a life, Chief Theologian. A life given in service to the royal family and the Alliance." "You have created an abomination," Varen countered harshly. "A being that is neither human nor Elorian. The Ecclesiarchy cannot allow this." The transformed Garrett moved to stand between Variella and Varen, his posture protective. The princess acted out of honor and compassion, virtues the Ecclesiarchy claims to uphold. Varen recoiled slightly at being addressed directly by the hybrid being. "It speaks as if it has rights," he said with distaste. "This experiment must be contained, studied. The contamination must not be allowed to spread." "He is not an experiment," Variella said firmly. He is Garrison Commander Garrett Stone, hero of the Alliance, who gave his life to save mine. What stands before me is not Garrison Commander Stone, Varen insisted. It merely carries fragments of his essence, corrupted by forbidden technology and ritual. Ishan stepped forward. Chief Theologian, from a scientific perspective, his quantum signature is stable. There is no risk of contamination, as you put it. Science, Varen scoffed. What does science know of the sacred nature of quantum essence? This is a matter for the ecclesiarchy, not your laboratories. Actually, came yet another voice, this is a matter for the Emperor. All turned to see Emperor Thalas himself entering the laboratory, his regal presence immediately commanding attention. Unlike Chief Theologian Varen, who wore the silver-white robes of the ecclesiarchy, the Emperor was dressed in the crystal-infused royal attire of deep blue that signified his status. Your Imperial Majesty, Varen said, bowing deeply. I came as soon as I confirmed the princess's heretical activities. This abomination is the result of my daughter's sovereign decision, Emperor Thalas interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. A decision made to honor the sacrifice of a loyal servant of the crown. Variella looked at her father in surprise. You knew? I am Emperor, Thalas replied simply. Very little occurs in the palace without my knowledge, especially when it involves ancient rituals and royal bloodlines. His gaze shifted to the transformed Garrett, studying him with interest rather than revulsion. So this is the result. Fascinating. Your Majesty, Varen protested, the ecclesiarchy cannot condone this violation of sacred law. The quantum essence of the royal bloodline must remain pure. Must it? Emperor Thalas challenged mildly. That seems a rather limited perspective, especially in an era of interspecies alliance. He approached the transformed Garrett, circling him with evaluative interest. What shall we call you? You are no longer simply Garrison Commander Stone, it seems. The hybrid being considered for a moment. I retain Garrett's identity and memories, but acknowledge I am fundamentally changed. Perhaps Garrett of House Alorian, if it pleases your Majesty. A smile touched the Emperor's lips. It does please me. A fitting designation for the first of what may be a new chapter in our people's history. Your Majesty! Varen exclaimed, aghast. You cannot possibly be considering legitimizing this experiment. Not an experiment, Chief Theologian, Emperor Thalas corrected. A bridge, a living embodiment of what our alliance with humanity could truly become. He turned to face Varen directly. The ecclesiarchy serves the crown, does it not? Varen's freckles pulsed with suppressed emotion. Of course, your Majesty, but... Then you will accept my judgment in this matter, Thalas said firmly. Garrett of House Elorian will be recognized as a legitimate citizen of the Empire, with all rights and protections thereof. The Chief Theologian looked as if he might protest further, but years of conditioning to royal authority won out. He bowed stiffly. As your Majesty commands, but the ecclesiarchy will be watching this development most carefully. I would expect nothing less, Emperor Thalas replied. You are dismissed, Chief Theologian. After Varen had departed, radiating disapproval with every step, the Emperor turned to his daughter. You took an enormous risk, Variella, not just with the ritual itself, but with the political consequences. I know, Father, she acknowledged, but it was a risk I had to take. For him, Thalas gestured to the transformed Garrett. For what he represents, Variella corrected. Proof that our species can be more than simply allies, that we can truly integrate, become something greater together. The Emperor studied her with newfound respect. Perhaps you understand the burdens of leadership better than I realized. He looked at Garrett again. And you, Garrett of House Elorian, where do your loyalties lie now? Where they have always been, Your Majesty, Garrett replied without hesitation. With the crown, with the alliance, and with Princess Variella. Emperor Thallus nodded, satisfied. Then I believe we have an opportunity here, one that transcends the narrow views of the ecclesiarchy. He addressed the room at large. What has happened here tonight must remain confidential for now. Lieutenant Mavis, Ishan Korin, you are bound by imperial decree to silence on this matter. Both nodded their agreement. Good, the Emperor continued. As for you, Garrett of House Elorian, I believe a period of adjustment and training will be necessary. Your new physiology likely brings abilities you will need to master. I will help with that, Ishan offered. My research on cross-species biology gives me unique insight into his condition. Excellent, Thallus approved. He turned to his daughter. And you, Variella, will need to recover your strength. The quantum exchange has depleted your reserves significantly. Variella nodded, acknowledging her fatigue. A small price to pay, father. The Emperor's expression softened slightly. Your mother would be proud of your courage, if not perhaps your adherence to tradition. He straightened, resuming his regal bearing. Rest now, all of you. We will speak more of this tomorrow. After the Emperor had departed, followed by Lieutenant Mavis, who was tasked with ensuring their privacy, Variella turned to Garrett. Are you truly... you? Do you remember everything? I remember dying for you, he replied softly. And I remember being called back by your voice, your essence. He looked down at his altered hands. I am not the same, but at my core, I am still Garrett Stone, still your protector. More than that now, Variella said, her freckles pulsing with emotion. We are quantumly linked. A part of me lives in you. And a part of me in you, he acknowledged. A bond that transcends conventional understanding. Ishan cleared his throat, reminding them of his presence. The Emperor is right about one thing. You both need rest. The quantum exchange has taxed your system severely. Variella nodded, suddenly feeling the full weight of her exhaustion. As she moved to leave the laboratory, Garrett fell into step beside her, a familiar positioning that spoke of his continued sense of duty, despite his transformation. What happens now? He asked quietly, as they made their way through the palace corridors. Variella considered the question. Now, we build the future my father envisions, one where humans and Elorians can truly become something greater together. She glanced at him, her freckles pulsing once. Beginning with us. 6 months later, Variella stood on the balcony of the Crystal Palace, watching as the twin suns of Eloria rose over the capital city. Beside her stood Garrett of House Elorian, his form now a familiar sight within the palace walls. The intervening months had brought significant changes. Garrett had mastered many of his new Elorian abilities, the bioelectric shield, enhanced strength and speed, even limited bioluminescence. Under Ishan's guidance, he had learned to control these powers, integrating them with his human military training. The ecclesiarchy, while still privately disapproving, had been publicly silent on the matter, honoring the Emperor's decree. Chief Theologian Varen had even, grudgingly, acknowledged Garrett's unique status during a recent ceremony honoring fallen soldiers of the Alliance. The parade route has been secured, Garrett reported, his indigo eyes scanning the city below with the same vigilance he had always shown. No unusual activity detected. Variella smiled. Still my protector, even with all that's changed. Some things don't change, he replied, returning her smile briefly before resuming his survey. Today marked the first anniversary of the Unity Parade attack, an event now commemorated as a celebration of Alliance resilience. Emperor Thallus would address the gathered citizens, speaking of progress and unity. And for the first time, Garrett would stand openly at Variella's side, his transformed nature a living symbol of what the Alliance could become. Are you nervous? Variella asked. It will be your first public appearance since Garos. Officially, Garrison Commander Stone died a hero's death, Garrett reminded her. Garrett of House Alorian is simply a new appointment to the Royal Guard, albeit one with unique characteristics. You know the rumors are already spreading, Viriella said. The servants whisper of the human Alorian hybrid, who serves the princess. Let them whisper, Garrett replied with equanimity. Today is about looking forward, not back. Viriella reached out, her hand briefly touching his. I've never properly thanked you for saving my life, for being willing to return. Garrett's indigo eyes met hers. You gave part of yourself to bring me back. There is no greater gift, no deeper bond. His voice softened. No need for thanks between us, Princess. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Lieutenant Mavis, now promoted to captain for her service during the Garos incident. Your Highness, it's time, she announced. The Emperor awaits you in the Grand Foyer. Vriella nodded, straightening her ceremonial attire. Let's not keep him waiting. As they made their way through the palace corridors, citizens and servants alike stepped aside, bowing to the princess. Many cast curious glances at Garrett, his hybrid nature evident in his lavender-tinted skin and glowing indigo eyes. In the Grand Foyer, Emperor Thalas waited, resplendent in formal regalia. Beside him stood Ishan Korin, now officially reinstated as a royal scientist, his exile rescinded in recognition of his service to the crown. Variella, the Emperor greeted his daughter warmly. And Garrett of House Alorian. Are you prepared for today's ceremony? Yes, Father, Variella replied, though I admit to some trepidation about how the public will respond to Garrett's formal introduction. Change often brings discomfort, Emperor Thalas acknowledged. But it is also the path to growth. He turned to Garrett. Remember, you represent not just yourself today, but a possible future for our people. I understand the responsibility, Your Majesty, Garrett replied, bowing respectfully. The royal procession moved from the palace to the redesigned Grand Promenade, now rebuilt and enhanced with additional security measures. Crowds lined the route. Citizens of all species gathered to commemorate the attack and celebrate the enduring alliance. As Variella and Garrett appeared on the royal viewing platform, a murmur rippled through the assembled crowd. The princess, they knew well, but her companion, with his curious hybrid appearance, was a new and unexpected sight. Emperor Thalas raised his hands for silence, then began his address. He spoke of remembrance for those lost in the attack, of gratitude for those who had protected the royal family, and of hope for the continued strengthening of the alliance. Then, in a move that surprised even Variella, he gestured for Garrett to step forward. Citizens of the Galactic Alliance. The Emperor's voice carried across the Grand Promenade. Today, we commemorate sacrifice and celebrate renewal. And there is no better symbol of both than the man who stands before you. The crowd's attention focused intensely on Garrett. 1 year ago, Garrison Commander Garrett Stone gave his life to save Princess Variella from assassins who sought to destroy our unity. Emperor Thalas continued. Today, through means that represent the very pinnacle of cooperation between our species, he stands again among us, transformed, renewed, a living bridge between human and Alorian. Gasps and exclamations rippled through the crowd. The Emperor raised his hand again for silence. In Garrett of House Alorian, we see the future of our alliance, not merely cooperation, but true integration, the beginning of something new and wondrous. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some applauded. Others whispered in shock or confusion. From the ecclesiarchy section, Chief Theologian Varen's disapproval was palpable, though he maintained a dignified silence. Emperor Thalas concluded his speech with a bold proclamation. Let this day mark not just remembrance of what was lost, but celebration of what has been gained and what is yet to come. As the ceremony continued, Viriella moved to stand beside Garrett, taking his hand openly before the assembled citizens. It was a calculated gesture, a public statement of her support and connection to this new being who was neither fully human nor fully Elorian. "Together, we build the future," she whispered, her words for him alone. Garrett's indigo eyes met hers, his transformed features softening with an emotion that transcended species. "Together," he agreed. Above them, the twin suns of Eloria reached their zenith, bathing the capital in golden light. And in that light, princess and protector, Elorian and human, past and future, all merged into a singular promise of unity that would reshape the galaxy in ways even they could not yet imagine. The journey ahead would not be easy. The ecclesiarchy would resist, traditionalists would object, and enemies like the Void Phantoms would continue to threaten the fragile peace. But in this moment, standing hand in hand before the citizens of the Alliance, Viriella and Garrett embodied a truth more powerful than any opposition. Evolution could not be stopped. Integration could not be prevented. The future belonged to those brave enough to embrace transformation. And transformation, once begun, could never truly be undone.